Welcome to the Traveling Professors. I'm Professor Bob.
And I'm Professor Sheri.
And together we are the Traveling Professors.
Our journey today is in Macedonia, and we're going to be heading to the Vergina Royal Tombs, which has the tomb of Philip II, Alexander the Great's father, and all sorts of other relics. So please enjoy.
From our map here, you see that we were at the archaeological site and the museum at Pella. And here is the route that we took to get to the royal tombs. Now, we did not stop at Aigai, which was the original capital of Macedonia before being moved to the new site at Pella by King Archelaus I, who ruled from 413 to 399 BCE. And there is a story that he went to the Delphi oracle asking where he should build his new capital. And the oracle stated that follow the herd of sheep. And so he found a herd of sheep outside the old palace and just followed them. They stopped at what became Pella. There are 4 other people after Archelaus I who were rulers of Macedonia before we get to Philip II, who is the father of Alexander the Great. Now, when you drive along the road, you'll see a sign and various signs that say Vergina. The site is called Vergina, but that's because after World War I and the Greco-Turkish War, various Greeks who were in Turkey were brought back to Greece, and a lot of them settled in this region, and they actually took down parts of the old palace to build their houses. And they named it Vergina after the legendary queen of Macedonia. But that was done in 1922. The site was later abandoned, and it has kept that name ever since. Now, as I said before, we did not go to Aigai, or the palace at Aigai, but here's an aerial view of the site, and then here's another one, and in this picture you see the amphitheater, which is particularly important, but I'll mention that in a second. Let's first look at the palace. It is huge. It is 3 times the size of the Parthenon. It is 70,000 square feet. The architect is believed to have been Phidias of Perrine, one of the men who helped construct the mausoleum at Halicarnassus. And this palace has 5,000 square feet of mosaics showing all sorts of different things. So it is a spectacular place. And then here's a picture looking into the amphitheater up towards the palace. Now, the amphitheater is important for one thing. Philip II, Alexander's father, is assassinated as he enters into this arena, but they are planning to start the expedition to conquer Persia. And he walks out, tells his bodyguard to stay behind. The reason why Philip did that was because they had statues of the Olympian gods on the stage area. And he wanted to walk out and show the people that he was protected by the gods. Not the best decision. And a friend of Alexander's comes out and stabs him to death. Sometimes people think he's assassinated in Pella, but he is not. So that's the palace at Aigai. So let's go to the burial region. Archaeologists have been investigating this part of Macedonia for tombs for a very long time. One of the earliest excavations around Vergina is in 1855, which was sponsored by Napoleon III. The first royal tomb was discovered in the area of the palace 1937 to 1940. But of course, then the wars break out, and that's going to be delayed. In 1949, they began excavating again. And ultimately, in 1970, Manolis Andronikos, the archaeologist, put his attention to what is known as the Great Tumulus, which is a big hill he was convinced was the burial tomb of the Macedonian kings. And in 1977, they found these 4 buried tombs. 2 had never been disturbed. That's the one of Philip II, father of Alexander the Great, which is Tomb 2, and Tomb 3, which is the son of Alexander the Great, Alexander IV. As you can see here, this is what the gigantic tumulus looked like. It was covered with trees. And so they had leveled the site, and here's when they finally get to leveling everything. They did leave one stand of trees there. The main tombs are right here in this particular region here, but you see there are some others. And then this view, you see again the excavation, and you see how they've gone down the mound. They put these little buildings in, these little burial buildings. They covered them over with dirt to seal them. And so they began excavating, and then when they found it, they then punched a hole in so they could send down a little periscope and see what was there, and then ultimately excavated it and went in. And this is what one of the tomb entryways looked like, and you see it's completely covered with dirt, but that will be entirely removed. And then once everything is excavated, this whole site will then be recovered in a mound, except it will have the museum inside of it. Here we see an artist's rendition of a cutaway view of Philip's tomb. And you notice there are two chambers, which makes it unique. There's the back chamber, which is actually the king's tomb. And then there's a front chamber, which is Philip's last wife. Sometimes she's called Cleopatra, sometimes she's called Medea, and her infant son. You go into the area where Philip's tomb is, and you have this little sarcophagus. That's the best way to describe it. And you lift the lid, pull it back, and inside of it is a gold larnax. And inside this larnax is the ashes of the king. Here's a view of the entire larnax of Philip's. It has actually been on tour in the past. By the way, on the top of the lid, that is a sunburst, which is the emblem of Macedonia, starting with Philip II. And then you open it up, and inside is a cloak and his ashes and a solid gold wreath, or crown if you wish. And here's a picture of that crown after they've restored it. Then in the rest of that room, in the back area beside the sarcophagus, you see this mound of artifacts here, bronzes. It's a bronze shield. You can see a pair of bronze greaves right there beside the shield. And then there's all sorts of gold, silver, bronze objects that are scattered all around the floor. And there's plenty more. But now the discussion is, once they open it up, is this really Philip II's tomb? So far, the proof that we have that he may be Philip II is that the larnax has the sunburst on it, which is, of course, something that he instituted. In addition, it's customary for the larnax to have in it a coin from the king that is, as well as a coin from the new king that follows. And there is an Alexandrian coin in there as well. But there's lots of other proofs. In this particular picture, you see an artist's rendition of what Philip of Macedonia looked like. He is, shall we say, badly damaged. Warriors fighting in the front are wounded all the time. Alexander had wounds on him, but Philip has two special ones. One of them is a lance that hit the side of his cheek and basically damaged his eye, forcing it to be removed, which left him with a terrible scar. The other one is a lance wound that went through his knee from side to side, and it was never right again. His one leg will then shorten. So the greaves are very important. And if you notice the greaves that were behind the shield, this is what they look like restored. And you notice that one of them is bent and significantly shorter than the other, which is a perfectly good example of what you would have to do with that kind of a wound. In addition, and then here's an example of a surviving knee joint that has that wound. It's not Philip's, but it has the exact spear point through the side of the knee. Then, if you turn around from where the original larnax was and the shield, here's a picture of the door that would enter into the outer chamber. And that door has this beautiful solid gold arrow quiver. And in it, there's 24 arrowheads. There's other objects. The wood is all deteriorated. But once again, there is another set of greaves. And if you look at this set, you'll notice from the side, this set is significantly shorter. And not only that, the leg appears to be much thinner. Here's a closer shot of the beautiful solid gold arrow quiver. These are customarily used for fancy burials for kings. This was probably made by the Scythians, probably purchased in Athens or some other city. We also have his cuirass, his body armor. And here's what the body armor looked like when they found it on the floor. It's leather with gold and other things. So here we have it restored. And you see, you have the bust of Philip, undamaged eye. And then you have the cuirass, and I want you to notice the buttons on it. They're lion heads, the emblem of the king of Macedonia. And then here is a picture that shows both the front and the back of the cuirass as it's restored. And this, of course, all the stuff is on display in the museum that will be in a few minutes. Going back to our drawing on Philip's tomb, now we'll go into the front antechamber. And this is the one that is unique. And it is a little different. It certainly is a queen's burial because she has a golden larnax as well. This is the tomb of his last wife, which is Cleopatra. She is also his first Macedonian wife. Now here's a picture of her larnax. It's not as ornate as the other one, but it does have the sunburst on it. And then when you open it up, what you see, of course, are not just her ashes, but a child's ashes. So this would be Kyronos, her son. What you see are two pieces of gold and purple material found in the small larnax. So it's fabric that the remains were wrapped in. and there's also a crown in here. In the restoration process, this is what the material that the ashes were wrapped in turned out to look like, and here is how the crown was restored as well. It's quite stunning. So that is some of the artifacts that are in the tomb. So let's go to the actual tomb today, which is now a museum. Here's a map that shows the whole area that we've been looking at. You see where the palace at Aigai is at the top. You see the theater, the palace. Then you see the great tumults. You see some of the tombs on one side, and then you see a tomb known as Eurydice's tomb. That was found in the 1990s. Then we get out of our van, and there is the entrance to the site at this point. You really can't see it from the road. And then we come in here to get our tickets. That's our entire group, our driver guide, 4 people, and myself. And you can see the rebuilt Tumulsk behind this. And then here's a wide angle shot of it. Here is the group walking towards it. So they excavated everything, then they built the museum over the site and then covered it over with dirt as it would have appeared in the ancient times of the tumults. Here you have the entrance, which is this long corridor that you go down to. And then when you exit, you will come out exactly identical one on the other side. Now, the downside of this is that they do not allow any photography in the museum, flash or no flash. And this is really because this is a tomb, and they want to show respect to the people who were buried there, their spirits. You know, in Greek museums, they don't like you standing next to something posing. They don't mind you taking pictures of it, but they don't want you posing with it. You don't belong. You're not part of it. And so it really is this tomb, like you walked into somebody's mausoleum, except they have all of their artifacts there. And of course, the larynxes are there. So Philip's, what's left of him, and what's left of Alexander the Great's son, and the wife of Philip are there. So it is a little memorial. It is eerie. The guide said that of all the museums he had been to of Greece, he thought that this one was the most, you felt more of the history there with you. Now, I managed to get a couple of pictures anyway when no one was around. They didn't really have anybody wandering around checking you out, but they did sell a nice set of postcards and other things that helped out on the situation. So let's now go in and see the museum tomb site. Here is a view of one of the Macedonian tombs, simply known as the Tomb of the Three Columns. It was found in 1980 during the excavation, and it was estimated to have been constructed in the early 4th century BC, but as you can see, it's been plundered and destroyed. The second of the 4 tombs is another one of those that has been looted. It's known as the Persephone's tomb because of its artwork, or the box-shaped grave because of its width. It's 3.5 meters long, 2.1 meters wide, and 3 meters high, and a quadrilateral construction with a box-like chamber, which is why it ends up with the name. The few bones that were found on the floor show that a man and a woman and a newborn infant were buried in this tomb. Its movable decorative elements may have been lost, but the Greek mythologically inspired murals come down to us. The most significant depicts the rape of Persephone by Hades, which is the reason why the tomb was conventionally called Persephone's tomb. According to art historians, this may be one of the greatest archaeological breakthroughs of the 20th century, because the painter's special artistic mastery is manifested by the exquisite colors as well as by the impressively dexterous depiction of forms. It is possible that it could have been painted by a man known as Nicomachus, one of the great painters of the time. Now, the museum has an area where they display all the artifacts that were found in the various tombs. And then you have areas where it shoots off and you can go and see the various tombs. So here is what it looks like when you're standing at the top of the museum floor looking down at what ends up being Philip of Macedonia's actual tomb. So I took this picture, and you can see how dark it is. The museum is very dark, very dark. And then after the people in front of us moved away, then I went down and was able to take this picture. Now, this tomb is 9.5 meters high and 5.5 meters wide. The frieze across the top is 5.5 meters. And it's actually made out of what is called domi, which are bricks, and they form a mansion with an antechamber and the facade of a Doric temple, which is what you see here. And then you have the double sheet marble doors in front, so that does not swing open. It's just supposed to remain shut. And then here is the frieze. There's the lower section is what it appears when you get into the museum, and then the upper section is what they theorize from the paint that survives. And it's believed that the scene shows Philip II and Alexander, his son, in some sort of a hunting, fighting scene. Here's an artist's rendition of what the front of the tomb would have looked like if the frieze had been fully restored. Here are the museum displays, and each of the areas has artifacts from either Alexander IV's tomb or Philip II's tomb, but you really need to look at the signage on the cases. But this is a view that you get when you walk into the area, and you see the restored armor of Philip of Macedonia, his helmet, his greaves, his armor cuirass, and his shield. And then you see in the background the silver objects and the gold larynx with his crown. And then here's another view of it looking at the incredible shield that he has in this wonderful display. And then you have the various cases. So here's one of the cases that has the shield that we first saw in the antechamber where his larynx was located at, and all sorts of bronze, silver objects. Here's another view where you can see the other side of that case. And then a couple of individual objects. This bronze container is actually a lamp. You would have put pottery object in it with oil and lit it, and it's perforated, and the light would then shine out and around. And then this one is a container where you can pour water or wine. See the lion's head on the spout. And here we have another one of the libation containers, the wine or water containers, and with a detail of the character on it. I'm actually being kind of kind by saying it could be a container for water or wine, because Philip was a great drinker, so much so that he was criticized by Demosthenes, his opponent from Athens, by a little statement. He said that, being a great drinker is a good quality in a sponge, but not in a king. And then here we have a silver and gold bowl with, again, the character in the bottom of it. The workmanship is just spectacular. And then this is the display of Philip's larynx with Philip on the inside and the crown that was in it as well, hanging over the top of it. Here is the prince's tomb, or Alexander IV, which is Alexander's son by Roxanne. It's a picture that I took, and there wasn't anybody there, and not very many people went down to see it. Poor guy. At any rate, it is built similar to that, obviously, of Philip's. The two round areas where they would have had a shield decoration. It is about 6.5 meters wide and about 5 meters high. And this was as close as I could get because they have it all blocked off. But remember I talked about the door and what happens when you go through it because it's not made to open. This is a picture from the archaeologists showing the inside of the tomb. And you can see that the door was knocked off and broken when it came through. This is probably taken when they punched the hole in the roof and shoot the picture. So it may have been broken prior to the archaeologists coming in, but they obviously repaired it. So we'll get a chance to look at the objects that are inside of this tomb next. You see two things in this picture. One is he does not have a larynx, so he has what is known as a hydra. This is where his ashes would have been put in. And then next to it is a set of his greaves, and you notice that they're perfectly shaped. One seems to be a little taller than the other, but they're the same size around. Then here's a closer view of the hydra. He has a gold wreath over his little hydra showing his rank. And then here's a picture where they removed it to film it for the guidebook. But here is how they display it in the museum. And the gold really shines out on this particular object. And then this case shows all of the silver objects that were found in Alexander IV's tomb. Once finished with the museum, we simply turned around and walked out the exit corridor out into the open. Again, here's the shot of the whole museum and the tumults view. And then you can climb on top of it, which is what we did. So this is the high point of the tumults, looking down towards where the town is in the palace area. And then here's a view showing the mountains in the background with the sun over it, the sign of the Macedonian kingship. And then once we were finished with that, we had a little lunch at this locality right across the street from the museum and picked up some souvenirs and then headed back to Thessaloniki. Sheri and I certainly hope you enjoyed the trip to Philip's tomb.
Sheri and I hope you enjoyed the tour. Please come by our YouTube channel at Bob Packett, and please subscribe and leave some comments. Thank you very much. I've been doing podcasting on history for over 15 years. I've got over 4,000 shows, and I've done CDs, which of course can be sent out as USBs. So if you would really like to get more on history for free, then come by my website, as you see here, historyaccordingtobob.com, and see what's there. So thank you very much again.